Well, greetings, everybody. Welcome once again to this episode of Just Steve. If you've been listening for a while, you know that I'm not doing anything fancy. There's nothing overproduced. There's nothing fake about this. It's just me, Steve Fredlund, hanging out with some cool and authentic people that I've managed to find along life's journey, kind of digging into whatever seems interesting and hoping that we can get some inspiration, hoping we can get some insights for our lives. And today, I'm very excited to be joined by John Kriesel. John, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Now, where are you calling in from?
Cottage Grove,
Minnesota. You know,
yes.
I'm located out of Minnesota, but most of the people I've been interviewing are not in Minnesota. So it's kind of fun. Kind of fun to get back. So people are like, Cottage Grove, where's that?
Right.
So a suburb of Minneapolis. Tell us just a little bit for the folks that don't know who you are. What's your deal? What do you do in the world? Let's get a little bit of background, a little context before we dig in.
Yeah, I'm kind of all over the place. I served 10 years in the military, deployments to Kosovo and Iraq. Was severely injured in a bomb blast in Iraq in 2006. I lost both of my legs. Two of my buddies in that same blast. Returned home, recovered, got back to Minnesota, and then ran for Minnesota House of Representatives seat in my community in Cottage Grove. I was elected in 2010, served one term there. Decided not to run for re-election, then moved on to assist veterans with getting VA benefits. So I work for a county in suburban Minneapolis helping veterans get VA benefits. I'm also a motivational speaker and a part-time personality on KFAN, FM 100.3 in Minneapolis.
Nice little plug there. I like getting the KFAN plug in there. Now you're a part-time personality. I'm assuming you're a full-time personality. You're just a part-time guest. Yes,
that's probably the best way of phrasing it.
So am I getting part of the personality now, or are you off right now in terms of your personality?
Oh, I'm on 24/7. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I've heard you out there. Fantastic stuff. Great contribution. So we could start in a number of different ways. I'm generally, let's start with. I guess the story of the 2006 accident, those things happened, and I'm sure there's places where people can go to hear all of the story about the details of all of those things. And I know you speak quite a bit, but what I was most interested in kind of reading about you, looking at your website, is I know a lot of folks have gone through that. Unfortunately, way too many have gone through something like what you're describing with friends being killed and losing legs and that sort of thing. But I'm curious, what was it in you at the time or now that's caused you to say, I need to tell the story? Like, rather than just sort of saying, that's my story, you've said, I want to go public with this. I want to tell the story. I want more people to know about this and maybe motivate and inspire them in some way. What do you think it is that pushed you to that avenue?
Well, when I think about it, it's crazy. I sometimes can't believe that it happened to me. But it's very real. I will never forget after the bomb went off, waking up on the ground, seeing my legs mangled, hearing my blood hitting the sand. I was bleeding a ton. I was certain I was going to die. I'm an optimist. I've always been an optimist. I didn't think there was any chance in hell that I was going to survive. So my friend saved my life. The doctors shocked me back to life at the first field hospital. I obviously don't remember that part of it, but on my way, then I ended up back in the United States at Walter Reed. And when I woke up in the ICU after 8 days in a medically induced coma and realized I was alive, I was just happy to be alive. And it taught me not to take things for granted. And so I guess the best way to answer it a couple ways is obviously what happened to me is insane. And what happened to me is not going to happen to most people, but we all go through some type of adversity. And so if I can share my story and give people perspective and teach them the lessons I've learned without them having to go through it, then it makes what I went through even more worth it than it already is.
Wow. So a lot of the folks that, in your specific example, I just sort of assumed that, this happened and you woke up 8 days later. I didn't realize there was sort of this moment, at least in the middle, where you were aware that something really bad was happening and you assumed you were going to die.
Yeah. I remember hearing the metallic clank of the bomb going off. It was 200 pounds of explosives packed into 2 propane tanks. So 100 pounds in each one. And that went off directly underneath our Humvee. So I remember that. I was knocked unconscious briefly, woke up on the ground, heard my buddy yelling, telling me not to give up. I heard one of my buddies to my left fighting for his life. He did not survive. And the whole thing, obviously, like I said, is crazy, but being able to share it, and it took a while, but it's been therapeutic because I'm using it to inspire others. And so writing the book, Still Standing, my book, Still Standing, the story of Staff Sergeant John Kriesel, the guy who wrote the book fully, we worked in a team on it, but Jim Cosmo is the official author of it. He interviewed everybody that was there to make sure we had an accurate, respectful of everybody involved. And that's when I learned, when I was in the medically induced coma, that I had been shocked back to life 3 times. I had been brought to 2 field hospitals in Iraq. So once the helicopter took off, I remember them asking me questions, and that's it till 8 days later. There's brief little flashes of memory of, I think, when I was coming out of the coma, whether the medication was wearing off or whatnot. But then it was basically helicopter to then Walter Reed. When I woke up at Walter Reed, that 8 days and the travel between there and Germany, and then Germany to the United States, that's all I don't remember.
I can't. I mean, obviously, sure, we can read the book, we can listen to your story, but I can't even fathom what that moment was like. And for you to be able to take that and then say, okay, how can I make something productive out of this to help other people? You said it took a little while. I'm curious, how long did it take you to actually feel like you could talk about it? Not necessarily where you're doing motivational speaking or writing a book, but even just to recount that, knowing that your friends had died and you nearly died. I mean, was there a period of time where you couldn't even talk about it?
Oh yeah, for sure. So when I woke up, and I think that a good example of how our military medical system is so fantastic now, or now saying 2006, but even better now, I'm sure in 2020, but compared to previous conflicts, specific Vietnam era, where I will say I feel like I'm fortunate to have been injured in the way I did, if that makes it sounds crazy, but
no, I get it.
Because my friends that weren't injured as visibly as I was, I won't say severely because they were as well. I was forced when I woke up in the ICU right away. I asked about my buddies. I found out that Tim lived and was still in Iraq. He was going to return to duty. And I found out that Corey and Brian had died. So that was devastating. I had just woken up, learned that. I was crushed. Well, there was a doctor there who said, tell me everything you remember. And they're doing that for a number of reasons. Checking memory, checking head injury, but getting me to talk about it. And I'd get through like a sentence or 2 of it before losing it. I'd be sobbing. It was impossible. And especially then too, I could still smell the bomb because of the dirt and stuff still on me. And they had me talk about it again and again and again. And they had people come to the room. Psychologists would come to the room. And I didn't want to talk about it, but I was in a hospital bed with no legs. So I wasn't running away.
Yeah.
And so I'm thankful, as uncomfortable as it was at the time, it gave me the tools then where now I have the only PTSD I have now is from the Minnesota Vikings. That's it. I have no PTSD from the blast or what happened because of the tools they gave me right at that hospital to teach me how to deal with it.
That's crazy. I mean, that was one of my questions, is because I assume there's still some of that piece. And maybe part of that is, you continually talk about it and heal, but that is amazing to me. And if they've had that sort of a breakthrough in treatment so that the mental side of injury is realized and addressed right away, that's phenomenal.
Right.
And so you're talking about the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I assume it's a little bit tongue in cheek here, or is there something tied to the incident?
No, just okay. The Vikings. The Vikings are they're so fantastic at ripping my heart out.
Oh, John, I actually just delivered a TEDx talk, and I actually talked about being a lifelong Minnesota sports fan, which means I live in a constant state of disappointment. But every year, it's like, here we go, and NFC Championship or whatever it is, and you're like, gone. So frustrating.
Yeah, they prepared me for the blast. I feel like the Vikings with all of the, the 98, the 2000, all of the tragedy. Then I woke up in Iraq and saw that my legs were gone. I thought, yeah, here we go again.
Of course they are, right? That's like when they missed the kick against the Seahawks.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, of course they missed the kick. Why wouldn't they miss that kick? And so, it's the situation that you can now, at least use as context for laughter is a beautiful thing, but obviously that's something you're never going to forget, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. I'm curious, as you think about that, as you're talking about that, does it feel like, so this was 14 years ago, does it feel like it was yesterday, or does it feel like it was 50 years ago? You know what I mean by that?
Yes, I think it's a little bit of both. Like when I see photos, I see how young I look in my buddies that I still see all the time, our Army buddies. Like, we look like kids.
Yeah.
But it feels like a week ago. But at the same time, I look at what, when I was reading, giving the intro to you, explaining kind of about me, it's a lot crammed into, 14, 15 years. I felt like it was a lot, but 15 years is a long time. So, yeah, I don't know. It depends on the day, I suppose. Yeah.
Do you have a preference as far as the medium by which you tell your story? So, podcasts, you've been on some of those. You've got KFAN, where you're not talking about that, but it does come up from time to time.
Sure.
You've got that. You've got, the actual speaking, where it's you in front of an audience. You've been given a platform. You have the book where you've been able to write it, through somebody in that sort of format. Is there a preferred way that you love to tell your story?
I love being in front of people and telling it, because I can see the reaction on their face. I can read the crowd. I can tell if it's making an impact. I can tell, I can base it off of the audience. I can throw in a little more humor if the audience behaves in a certain way. But being able to directly see it, on the radio, you can tell a joke that might seem hilarious. You're not sure if people are laughing, though. Can't hear the feedback on it. When they're in studio, then, sometimes there will be listeners that are allowed in studio. Then you can kind of see, and that makes it more fun. But, I prefer being in front of a crowd.
And just to give you, I mentioned the TEDx talk. I did that. It was right before the whole quarantine thing started. I had to do it in front of an empty auditorium. So I understand that.
How weird.
Like, it's so odd. Like this mega auditorium, and you're like, no reaction at all. So you have no idea. Like, I hope this comes across well on video, because I have no idea how it is right now. And I totally agree with that. Kind of being able to feed off each other. And I suppose with a book, you don't get that. Unless you get the responses, but you're not going to get that immediate feedback.
Absolutely.
I'm curious. This idea of I love your talk. I've seen snippets of it. This idea of overcoming adversity is such a great message for so many of us who have adversity in our lives. But I think a lot of people listening are going to be like, well, all right, I've never been through what John's been through. I've had some tough stuff, but man, now I start to feel like I'm a schmuck because I haven't been through that, and I'm still complaining or whining or have mental issues because of that. Or I'm kind of curious, how can you bridge the gap for people that are saying, I've had adversity in my life, but now I hear John's story, and I guess I'm grateful I never went through that, but I still struggle. So how can your story of that situation be used for other people to overcome their adversity, which is clearly very different?
Sure, and I could see how someone would, and that's another reason why I like to share it in front of people, is because then I'm able for them to I can relate with them visually.
Right.
In the crowd, I can see that I'm relating with them, and that what happened to me, like I said before, isn't going to happen to anybody that's listening, right? It is such a rare, even being deployed in Iraq, the chance of getting a limb blown off is so low, which is of course why it happened to me. That is not going to happen to anybody else, okay? But we all face adversity, whether it's losing our job, whether it's wife leaves, husband leaves, some type of adversity that we face. Everybody does. That's a guarantee in life. It really doesn't matter how big or how small that adversity we face is. It's the attitude that we bring to the table that will help us overcome it. And it's not, it's that fine balance of trying to not go, well, toughen up, Cupcake, because you got both your legs, you weren't blown up. Because what happened to an example, my company commander in Iraq, when he was being interviewed by the author of my book, he was talking about, He said, okay, he's a at that time he was the principal of a school. Now he's a superintendent. He told Jim, this is going to take some time because if a student comes in, then you got to go out in the hall and we'll continue after talking to the student. And he said his adjustment was he just got back from Iraq, buried 3 of his men, saw all kinds of death and terrible things. And a student comes in and is upset because they didn't make the band, they didn't make first chair in band or whatever, or they didn't make the football team, or they didn't have. And he said his wife told him, you need to stop thinking like that, because what happened to that kid, that is the worst thing that's ever happened in their life. And who are you to judge that? And so that's where I don't look at it and judge people in that way. And when I share my story, I try to do it in a manner that to take what I went through and insert whatever it is, whether it's job loss or something else, and use the message to overcome that, whatever it is.
So really the message is about overcoming adversity, and my story, my adversity happens to be what I dealt with in Iraq, but that's not your adversity. But it's not a story of here's how I overcome, losing limbs and losing friends in Iraq and try to somehow retrofit it into their thing. It's saying the undercurrent core message is how do we overcome adversity of any kind? And here's your perspective because of the adversity you had to overcome.
Absolutely. 100%.
So what is that? What is that core message of so I'm sitting here going, all right, I've got adversity in my life. And kind of even what you said relates to me because I've been to Rwanda. I've seen people that haven't eaten for weeks, that don't have clean water. And I come back here and I hear, a kid complain about missing lunch or something. I'm like, seriously.
Right. Or the Wi-Fi is slow or something.
Right, exactly. So I have the same sort of thing that you have. I can't project that on to that. I have to look at the undercurrent, the overall theme. So I'm kind of curious, what is that overall theme? What is that overall message to people that are saying, I do have adversity? And now I believe that John has some insight that he can give me. What is the step that you encourage people to take, or perspective that you encourage them to lean into?
Absolutely. So first things, obviously, talk to someone about it. Talk to your friends, talk to your parents. Sometimes, though, it is just one of those days. And we don't know what it is that is bothering us or whatnot. And on those days, I tell people, take a Post-it note, write 3 to 5 things in your life that you're truly thankful for, that put a smile on your face. Put that on your bathroom mirror. That's the first thing you see when you wake up the next day. And starting the day on a positive note with a positive thought it sets the tone for your entire day. And so I use humor to get through everything, even probably when I shouldn't, when it's not appropriate. But if you can laugh at yourself, you can get through anything. A positive attitude and a sense of humor will get you through everything. Because we've all been through points where you just go, all you can do is laugh. Where it is just one of those, it's just one hit after the other. Yeah. And you laugh at it because you can't change it. And so all you can do is try to look at the bright side of it.
What I hear in there a little bit, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, is this idea of when you're having one of those days, that's okay. That's normal. That's part of the human experience, and sort of giving yourself permission to have one of those days rather than what's wrong with me? I'm such a schmuck because I'm just kind of feeling down, right? Right.
And we all have bad days, but don't turn it into a bad week or a bad month or it's a bad day and that's it. You hit the reset button, start that next day. But that's why it's important that next day starts off good. And so if you can stay as positive as possible going through the adversity, then you'll learn from it. And when you get through it, you'll be able to reflect on it, and it will make you a better, stronger person rather than letting it just define you, being defined by what you went through or what happened to you. And so, we can't control the things that happen to us most of the time, but we can always control how we respond. And if nothing else, when it's all said and done, we want to be able to have people look at us and say they responded well to whatever was thrown their way, whether it's business, personal life, whatever, right?
Yeah, I love that. And it sounds so cliche, right? Because a lot of people say that, well, you can't control what happened to you, you can control how you respond, but it's so true. It's true. So true. And on the best days, that's what we're doing, is trying to control our response. And I love what you said about the Post-it note. That's sometimes all these conversations can stay so ethereal and conceptual. And, here's a practical thing. Write down 3 things that you're grateful for, put it on your mirror, so when you wake up in the morning, boom, there it is.
Yep. It sounds corny as heck. When I heard that, and I forget where it was. I think someone might have told me in the hospital, or I forget. But
Yeah.
where it's one of those where you're just like, okay. But
Right.
having had tough days and used that, it's great. And then by doing that, it kind of trains us too to focus on the good and be thankful for the blessings in our life. And we should be doing that year round instead of just around Thanksgiving or the holidays. Like, and then when you have a bad day, it's just nothing but a bump in the road because you're focused on the good. You know, it's a mindset that sets you up for the whole year, for your whole life. You know, and it's worth the extra work.
It is a mindset. I know my wife does a gratitude journal. She's done that for years, and
that's awesome.
And all of these different practices of people that are, and it's not so much, part of it is a journal. It's beautiful to be able to capture those things, but part of it is like what you're saying is it's a shift in mindset because we are, I think, physiologically and psychologically wired to remember the negative. Right. I talk about this, and Corey Cove, obviously you know him, and I know I play poker. I've got a poker podcast too, but I talk about, like, you know, when you take a bad beat in poker, you remember that so much more than when you get lucky. And because it's just psychological. And I think that's the same thing in the human experience, is that when something negative happens, we dwell on that. And I know research has shown, and I'm curious if you're familiar with this or if you have anything to add to this, but research shows that if you take something good that happens and you dwell on it, you actually like allow yourself to soak into that thing for like 7 seconds, you're going to remember it far more. Otherwise, it's just like Teflon. You just forget it altogether.
Right. And we start taking it for granted. And that's the thing. And I think given our current situation too, it's a little bit tougher to just focus on the good. And, you know, I'm trying to remind my wife, and she's been remarkable. We're wired a little bit different, though. I'm a little more of the positive one. Yeah. She's a little more of a pessimist. She's not a pessimist, but she's more of a pessimist than I. Yeah. And it's just, but I can see she's been more positive as of late, and it's working, but it is a mindset. It is a training, like you said, what your wife does with the gratitude journal. A way for me to learn, if I'm listening to something, retaining it. Now, part of that's the head injury, but if I write it down, and it was always that way in school too, we retain it more. That's why writing that gratitude journal retains it more. Writing the notes to put on the mirror, we retain that more, and then we see it, and it becomes ingrained in us, and we focus on that.
It's so true. I mean, that's like how I studied a lot in college. Was I would just rewrite notes and like, what is this doing? I'm not really learning anything else, but it soaks in. So why would it not be different for gratitude or anything else that we want to have as positive influences in our lives? Right. I'm curious, like the gratitude piece, was that always part of your life and how you approach things prior to 2006, or was that something you had to actually learn to be intentional about gratitude? Or
I would say I was a little bit like that. I've always been cheerful. I've always been an optimist to a fault. I've always used humor. But that, I think, when I woke up in the hospital, I was forced, gratitude was forced on me, because you can't help but when your last memory is, I'm never going to see my friends again. I'm never going to see my family again. I'm never going to see a Vikings missed field goal again. Yeah. And then you all of a sudden wake up in the hospital. I looked around and I'm like, I'm alive. Then it didn't matter. My legs were gone. All that didn't matter. I was just happy to be alive.
Did you have somebody sort of, so like the gratitude happened right then because you had the experience where you thought you were dead and now you're alive. But did you have people like kind of helping you be grateful for things, or was that more of a natural, inherent thing that you just sort of welled up post-event?
I think a lot of it was natural. And then on top of it, the community, the Twin Cities community was so generous that I was getting get well cards from people I had never met, because the incident was on the news. They explained what happened to me and the loss of the two guys. And so people would write to me in the hospital. People here had fundraisers to help me make my home handicap accessible and stuff like that. So when that kind of stuff happens, it's very tough not to be grateful. And so all of those blessings, I think, helped me be positive. I'd like to think without them, I still would have just been grateful overall, because I lived when I probably shouldn't have.
I love hearing that. I know we're almost out of time, but I want to kind of maybe dig into that one just a little bit. So the impact of people that you didn't know, just sending you a card or setting up a fundraiser or contributing in some sort of way, the power of that. Maybe talk a little bit about that from the perspective of, you know, a lot of us are in the middle of this quarantine situation, and we don't really know what to do, or we hear about bad things on the news, we don't know what to do. Talk about the power of just writing a card or doing some small thing to encourage somebody who's going through something really difficult. Because I think we can look at that and say, well, yeah, a lot of people are writing them. What good does it do for me to write something as well? But maybe from your perspective, somebody who's actually been a recipient of that, what is the power of even those small gestures?
It makes the tough days easier, because I kind of refer to it as the Walter Reed shuffle. You'd have 2 steps forward, next day be 1 step back. Some days we're 2 steps back, next day is 1 step forward. And there's times where you feel like, I'm never getting out of here. And so you look for any sign of encouragement. And the current situation with the quarantine, some people are choosing to not see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm trying to find the light at the end of the tunnel. For me, a lot of it was those cards, those get well cards. I'd be feeling low. I'd look at it. Someone took time out of their day to handwrite a note to give me encouragement. All of these people were behind me, so I better not let them down. I better not quit. On the days that I'm sore and it hurts, push twice as hard, because these people are behind me.
I love it, man. So how do people connect with you? So if they're saying, man, I like how this guy thinks, I need a little bit more of this overcoming adversity in my life. I'd either like to hear him speak, I'd like to read the book, I'd like whatever. They want to connect with you. How can they do that?
I'm most accessible on Twitter at John Kriesel, and it's JohnKriesel. My website is johnmkriesel.com. There's a link in my Twitter bio. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram somewhat, but I spend more of my energy on Twitter. It's a lot more fun. It's more rapid. For me with the short attention span, it's perfect.
All right, and I'll put all of those links in my notes as well. Perfect. But so they can get the book on your website as well?
Absolutely, johnmkriesel.com. Otherwise, amazon.com has it as well. I'm currently, during the quarantine, working on the audiobook version of it too, so I hope to have that out within the next month or so.
Oh, fun. That's fantastic. Well, I'm going to wrap up, and then we'll come back to you to close us off with final thoughts. But, guys, man, this is so fantastic having John and all the guests that we've had in. If you like what you're hearing and you think, man, this is cool, I get to hear all these interviews with interesting people every week. If you want to support what I'm doing, feel free to go to patreon.com/Fredlund, support me out there. Otherwise, just what I would love for you to do is just, when this is done, just like, rate, review, subscribe, do those things that are kind of going to help people see that this thing is up and running, and that they should maybe pay attention to it, and we'll get more followers, more people part of this community where we're all trying to live our most fulfilling lives. So that would help me a lot. Feel free to connect in any way, shape, or form that you want, social media, email, whatever that is. But with that, let's come back to John to close us off for today.
So I think, especially in the current with the COVID-19 situation, there's times where people feel hopelessness. They feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and it's tough. I currently don't watch the news right now. I avoid the news. I avoid talk radio, except when I'm on it on Friday mornings. It's important to search for the good, even if it seems like too much work, even if it seems hopeless. There are so many good stories out there. We're cresting over this hump. And I feel like there is light at the end of the tunnel. Focus on that. Focus on the good. Be well. Be cheerful. Again, be thankful for the blessings in your life and focus on those. It makes the other stuff out of your control seem a lot less of an impact on your life. All right. Life is good. Focus on that.
Fantastic. John, thank you so much for being with us today.
You got it. Have a good one. Thanks for having me on.